welcome back to the Integration Code. I'm your host, Kaylin Rakowski. If you're new here, I'm glad you found your way, and if you've been hanging out with me for a while, thank you for being here. And, thank you for being the select few that are willing to sit with the work that doesn't rush, that doesn't bypass, and doesn't offer the easy answers, okay? This podcast isn't about, chasing peak experiences. It's not about fixing yourself or becoming some perfected version of who you are or who you believe you should be. It's about learning how to live inside of your body again, how to stay present when things get quiet, how to really integrate what opens instead of just collecting moments of insight and calling it healing. Okay? And today's episode comes from a conversation I keep having with clients, with colleagues, and honestly, just something I've been really contemplating myself. I've watched so many people have real breakthroughs. Those moments of clarity, moments of relief, moments where, something shifts inside of them. And then weeks or months later, they come back to confused, lost, feeling stuck again. They feel contracted, right? The anxiety returns. They feel tired, almost like they flatlined. Sometimes even ashamed of themselves, ashamed that they don't feel good enough as they did before, ashamed that, they're feeling anxious again, ashamed that this opening or moment of clarity didn't last. And I want to say this clearly right from the beginning. If that's been your experience, you didn't do anything wrong. Okay? Let's just put a pin in that right now, button it up, give it a kiss. If that's been your experience, you haven't done anything wrong. In fact, you've experienced a dip after a breakthrough. It often means the work actually worked, but no one prepared you for what comes next. So my goal today is to really elaborate on the aftermath of the breakthrough, of the healing, of the insight, of the aha, and really start talking about the hardest part of healing, okay? And this is the part of healing that no one really prepares us for. I know no one really taught me this, okay? Not the trauma, not their survival years, not even the breaking open. Like, none of that has been the hardest part for me. The hardest part is what happens when life finally gets good and your body doesn't know how to live there. Okay? I'm going to say that again. The hardest part of healing is what happens after. When life finally gets good, but your body doesn't know how to live there, okay? And if you think about it this way, right? You spent years learning how to survive storms. So when things soften, peace feels suspicious, right? Joy feels risky. Safety feels like a trick. It's like, I hear this all the time from my clients, and, being someone who's gone through a lot of trauma, I can really resonate with this. It's this feeling of always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always waiting for, that next mountain to climb, that next, dragon to slay, essentially, right? And it's because your nervous system is still scanning for danger, still gripping to armor that's no longer needed, and still waiting for the next collapse. And this is where so many people quietly panic. And, I hear people say things like, why am I pulling back now? Why do I feel numb or anxious after everything finally opened, after I healed, right? Why does it feel like I'm losing something? And this episode is about that moment. It's about the moment after the breakthrough, after the ceremony, after the awakening, when instead of this experience of expansion, right, or opening, you feel contraction. And what I want you to hear right now is this. The contraction is not failure. The contraction is not regression. It is your nervous system doing what it knows best, right? It's not betraying you. It is your body asking to be taught something it has never known before, that it's never felt, that it's never experienced. Okay? We talk a lot about, healing moments that are loud. My clients love to celebrate the big release, the big insight, the big emotional opening. But we don't talk enough about what comes after. And it's this quiet phase, right? It's this phase where, like, the adrenaline drops. The nervous system realizes, oh, like, we're not fighting anymore. There's nothing here to fight or to overcome. And the problem is when you have a system that's been shaped by survival, that moment can feel so destabilizing, right? When really it is reorienting, okay? Because survival gave you structure. Hypervigilance once gave you this feeling of purpose. Overthinking kept you prepared. Tension kept you upright. So essentially, when those patterns begin to soften, your system doesn't immediately relax, right? It starts to have this feeling if I'm not bracing, then what am I supposed to do? Right? That's why so many people don't know how to slow down. They don't know how to be still. They don't know how to pause. They don't know how to rest because they connect that with, falling apart, of, not doing enough, not being productive. The list goes on and on. But what's actually happening in the body is that it's trying to learn how to rest without losing itself. Okay? It's really trying to learn how to be with itself, right? Because so many times these survival mechanisms and ways of being really keep us in a heavy state of avoidance. And it looks like, productivity or achievement or, whatever, insert blank, but really there's an underlying energy of avoiding the truth. And even deeper to that, I mean, the truth of your body, the truth of your soul. So before I get sidetracked on that, after a major opening, our nervous system often pulls back. And not because, the door is closing on us, but because it opened wider than your baseline can hold. Okay? So again, when our nervous system is pulling back, it's not because we're failing, it's not because we're going backwards, but it's because this breakthrough, this opening, this release opened us up wider, than our baseline nervous system could hold. Okay? So essentially, what we're talking about is that expansion shows us what's possible, right? We get that glimmer, we get that glimpse. And the contraction is showing us what is sustainable and what we have capacity for. And the integration is the bridge between. Okay? Your system isn't shutting down, it's slowing the process so it doesn't overwhelm you, right? Because again, anything that happens too fast, too hard, too quick to the body, to the nervous system, it will collapse. It won't allow us to hold it, essentially. And this is why after breakthroughs, people experience, a lot of fatigue, emotional flatness, anxiety without a clear direction or story. A lot of people feel this desire to cocoon, to withdrawal. Old patterns surface and get really loud. And instead of meeting, these with compassion, most people begin to judge themselves. My clients will say, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just stay here? Why am I back here again? Right? But here's the thing. You're not back. You're learning how to stay, how to meet yourself, and how to relate to yourself in a completely different way. And I think this is hard for most of us because, Like I said, if you've built this identity or nervous system around survival, safety feels more dangerous than chaos, right? And it's something that almost no one really talks about. If a nervous system is conditioned by chaos, safety can feel more threatening than danger, right? Because chaos is familiar, threats are predictable. Peace, safety, well, that's unknown territory, right? So when life finally stabilizes, when relationships soften, when you're no longer constantly reacting, your body may interpret that stillness as a risk. And this is why, joy can feel kind of edgy, while calmness or peace can feel really uncomfortable. Why you find yourself waiting for that other shoe to drop, right? And this is the moment that the deeper work really begins. Not when we're off, like, being shadow slayers or slaying dragons, but, really convincing your body that it's safe, right? Not chasing the breakthroughs, but learning how to relax into wholeness. And this really is what integration looks like. This is what, becoming embody looks like. Okay? We hear those words integration and embodiment thrown around, but this really is the pathway to that. Okay? And there's another layer here that I think isn't often spoke to that really deserves more attention, and it's grief. When you finally feel what safety or presence feels like in your body, you also feel the years, right? Years that you lived without it. It's a grieving process, right? You feel how much that you had to adapt. You feel how much you endured. You feel how much you survived instead of lived. That's painful, right? And the grief isn't there because, the healing didn't work. It means that it worked enough, that it worked deep enough to let the truth come through. And the thing is that integration doesn't rush the grief away. It lets it move without collapsing into it. And, not to get too sidetracked, but I will just say, like, for me, this is like bringing up memories of when my dad had died. And grief is such a just multifaceted emotion as it is. And when I stopped really trying to fix my grief or bypass my grief and really got close and intimate with it, and really started allowing it to integrate into the system, it was this beautiful thing that began to move with me and to move with my body and to move with my nervous system and to move with my spirit. But it wasn't a phase of collapsing into it, but more of like being a witness of it. Okay? So if that makes sense. But I think, this is why people get stuck, because when we really start healing, there is a collapse, or I shouldn't really say collapse. There is a contraction, I guess is a better word for it, after the big aha, after the big breakthrough. And instead of learning how to live in that phase of integration, people just go off and start searching for another opening, right? Another peak, another activation, another experience. I see it all the time in my line of work. But here's the truth, okay? If you keep needing to reopen the door, it's often because you haven't learned how to live in the room. Oof, mic drop, end the podcast. If you keep needing to reopen the door, it is because you haven't learned how to live in the room, okay? Healing is not about intensity. It is about capacity. Can your nervous system hold goodness without armor? Can it experience peace without bracing? This isn't built through force, right? It's built through safety, through presence. Okay? When you teach your body that it doesn't need to be on high alert anymore, that it's allowed to soften, that it's allowed to arrive, that it's allowed to be held by the life that you fought so hard to create. Integration isn't, staying expanded forever. It's trusting yourself through that phase of contraction without abandoning yourself or your body. It's letting the nervous system learn slowly and gently that it doesn't have to protect you from happiness. Right? So the real achievement here isn't the breakthrough. It's feeling safe in the life that you earned. The one that you have fought so hard for. The one your body doesn't yet know how to inhabit. And, if you're in that in-between space where things are better, but your system hasn't fully caught up yet, I want you to know that you're not doing anything wrong, right? You're not collapsing. You're not going backwards. You're integrating. And this is the beautiful sweet spot where healing becomes real. Okay? And if you're in this phase, the thing to do is not to shame yourself or not trying to, rush to find the next opening or to rush to, get this feeling or sensation to leave the body, but to get really close and intimate with it. Give it space to be witnessed, to be felt. Knowing that it's safe with you, because that's how we integrate. That's how we alchemize. Okay? And this is when you take healing out of just like a concept or, something that lives in the mind and you really bring it down into the body. This is when it becomes embodied wisdom and truth. And if you're looking for, additional support with this, if you feel like you've been grappling with something, if you feel stuck, if you feel like you are looping in the same, stages of healing, I do offer at-home psychedelic therapies, and this is a great way to really add a catalyst to your healing. But I only invite people who are ready to say yes to the deep work, because what I'm offering isn't a quick fix. It isn't a magic pill, but it can absolutely be a doorway into your most authentic self, your essence, your aliveness, and your truth. So if you're curious about what that looks like, we do have a special right now for only $59 a session, which is like bananas, unheard of. So if you want more info, head over to the show notes. And if not, I will catch you on the next episode. Love you so much.